Ladies and gentlemen, that man in the wheelchair, being handed the highest civilian honor this nation can bestow, that's Admiral James Thorne. But if you rewind the clock just 1 year, you'd have seen a very different scene. A broken man, rejected by the very institution he'd given his legs for. This is the story of how he went from that depth of despair to this moment of triumph, and it's a story that proves heroes sometimes arrive in the most unexpected forms. So, get comfortable, and if this story touches your heart even half as much as it did mine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Stories of the Heart, for more tales that remind us of the incredible power of the human spirit. After the IED attack that severed his spinal cord during a humanitarian mission, Admiral James Thorne learned a harsh new truth. The Navy he had served for 35 years had a limited shelf life for broken heroes. The Board of Inquiry was polite, resolute, and utterly devastating. "We simply don't have a role that fits your current capabilities, Admiral," the chairman had said, his eyes avoiding the wheelchair. "Your service has been exemplary, but the demands of the position," they offered him a quiet, paper-pushing retirement. A gilded cage. To a man who had commanded fleets, it was a life sentence of irrelevance. He retreated into a fortress of his own making, its walls built from bitterness and its moat filled with self-pity. He moved into a modest, accessible home, pushing away friends, and snapping at the nurses his pension afforded. The world had become a series of obstacles, and he was its most hostile resident. The only person who entered his orbit daily was Leo, the janitor for the small apartment complex. Leo was a quiet man in his late 30s, his hands calloused from work but always gentle. He moved through the halls with a quiet efficiency, his cleaning cart rattling softly. He was always accompanied by his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, a little girl with wide, curious eyes and a whisper that could soften granite. Thorne mostly ignored them, or offered gruff, one-word answers to Leo's cheerful, good mornings. He saw them as part of the background noise of his diminished existence. The turning point, as it often is, came not with a bang, but with a whimper. A spilled glass of water. Thorne, trying to reach for a book on a high shelf, had knocked it over, the water cascading onto the floor and, more humiliatingly, onto his lap. He sat there, soaked and seething, the cold dampness a cruel mockery of his helplessness. It was in this state that Leo found him, having heard the crash. Instead of saying anything, Leo simply got a towel. He didn't rush to Thorne, didn't fuss. He knelt and started mopping up the water from the floor. "Happens to the best of us, Admiral," he said softly, his voice devoid of pity. Then, he did the unthinkable. He picked up the remote control from the table, placed it deliberately just out of Thorne's reach on the arm of his chair, and stood back. Thorne stared, first at the remote, then at Leo, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "What is this?" he growled. "You dropped the remote, sir," Leo said calmly. "I'm just cleaning the floor. I can't reach it from here." Thorne snapped. Leo met his gaze, his own eyes holding a deep, inspoken understanding. "I know," he said simply. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" It was a spark in the darkness. That simple, challenging question was the first time in a year anyone had treated Thorne not as an invalid, but as a man with agency. Furious, Thorne contorted his body, stretching his aching muscles until his fingertips brushed the plastic and dragged it clattering into his lap. He was panting, but he felt a surge. Of something he hadn't felt in a long time, victory. That small act of defiance opened a door. Leo started staying after his shift. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He saw Thorne not as a paralyzed admiral, but as a man whose command center, his body, had been severely damaged but whose strategic mind was fully intact. Leo, it turned out, had been a promising mechanic in the army before an injury of his own. A less severe one, but one that ended his career and led to his wife leaving him and Maya. He understood loss. Their sessions began. Leo, using his mechanical ingenuity, started to see Thorne's wheelchair not as a prison, but as a vehicle. He began making small, illegal modifications in his garage at night. He reinforced the frame, tweaked the motors for more torque, and even rigged a simple, voice-activated clamp system for holding items. Meanwhile, Thorne, slowly at first, began to share his knowledge. He taught Leo about logistics, about pressure points in any system, about leadership. The real breakthrough came from Maya. She would sit in the corner, drawing, and one day she presented Thorne with a picture. It was a stick figure in a wheelchair that looked like a rocket ship, flying over a city. "Your chair is cool," she whispered. "Daddy's making it superhero fast." Inspired, Thorne remembered a proposal he had tried to push through the Navy years ago, a rapid response, disaster relief unit using lightweight, amphibious vehicles that could navigate treacherous, post-catastrophe terrain. The board had rejected it as unnecessary. Now, with Leo's mechanical genius and his own strategic mind, they began to build a prototype of the core vehicle, adapted to be operated entirely by someone with limited mobility. They worked in secret, a retired admiral and a janitor, fueled by pizza, shared purpose, and the quiet admiration of a little girl. Thorne's mind was alive again, solving problems, innovating. His body was still paralyzed, but his spirit was in overdrive. The test came during the historic Millvale floods. The river burst its banks, inundating the town, stranding hundreds. Conventional rescue vehicles were useless in the submerged, debris-strewn streets. The news showed desperate people on rooftops. Thorne and Leo looked at each other. This was it. They loaded their modified, rugged, amphibious wheelchair, now more of a compact, all-terrain vehicle, into Leo's old truck and drove to the edge of the disaster zone. Emergency crews tried to stop them, seeing a man in a wheelchair as a liability. But then Thorne took command. His voice, the one that had once directed aircraft carriers, cut through the chaos. "Son, I've coordinated operations more complex than this in my sleep. That vehicle can go where your boats can't. Now, are you going to stand here and argue, or are you going to let me save some lives?" They let him through. With Leo as his spotter and co-pilot, and using a complex system of joysticks, voice commands, and the custom-built tools Leo had fabricated, Admiral Thorne navigated the treacherous waters. He used the clamp to pull debris away from windows, he ferried children to safety on a small sled attachment, his knowledge of currents and structural integrity guiding him through unstable areas. News cameras, desperate for a hopeful story, captured it all. The determined Admiral in his high-tech chair, the quiet janitor guiding him, a team of two forgotten men becoming the unlikeliest of heroes. They saved over 40 people that day. The video went viral. The Navy, watching the man they had cast aside become a global symbol of ingenuity and courage, had no choice but to reconsider. The old board was dissolved. A new one, looking at Thorne's proven capabilities and his revolutionary vehicle design, a design that would now become standard issue for certain disaster response units, offered him not just a job, but a new command. He was appointed head of the newly formed Adaptive Response Division, tasked with developing technology and strategies to integrate personnel of all abilities into active service. And so we return to this stage. As the president places the medal around Admiral Thorne's neck, the camera pans to the audience. There sits Leo, holding a beaming Maya on his lap. He's not in his janitor's uniform anymore, but in the crisp attire of the Navy's newly appointed Chief of Innovative Engineering, a position created just for him. Admiral Thorne takes the microphone. His voice is strong, but thick with emotion. "They told me I was broken," he says, his gaze finding Leo in the crowd. "They told me my service was over. But then a man who cleaned floors for a living taught me that being broken isn't about what you can't do. It's about stopping the search for what you can." He didn't see a paralyzed man. He saw a partner. He didn't offer me pity, he offered me a challenge. And his beautiful daughter reminded me that even a wheelchair can be a rocket ship, if you have the courage to fly. So, what's the lesson here? It's that our greatest limitations are often the stories we tell ourselves. It's that sometimes, the person who can see the hero you still are isn't a high-ranking official, but the one who quietly mops the floor beside you. If this story of resilience, friendship, and second chances inspired you, if it reminded you that it's never too late for a new beginning, do us a favor and like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel. Because everyone has a story, and the next one might just change your life. Thank you for watching.